There are cities that modern maps cannot point to. There are civilizations that textbooks are unable to name. If you have ever heard of the tales from 1001 Nights, then you might already know about the golden city hidden within the desert. But what if I told you that this city might have truly existed? In today's video, we are going to explore the mystery behind this legendary city. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. In the autumn of 1930, a man stood before one of the harshest challenges ever conceived by mankind. His name was Bertram Thomas, a legendary British explorer. In an unannounced decision, he embarked on a journey that would later be remembered as a historic milestone, the effort to become the first European to cross the Rub al-Khali, a vast, ferocious, and mysterious desert that lay across the Arabian Peninsula. Covering an area of approximately 250,000 square miles, stretching across Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen, the Rub al-Khali, known to the west by the chilling name the Empty Quarter, is the largest sand desert in the world by volume. Towering dunes, some reaching heights of over 800 feet, not only created an unforgiving terrain but also concealed all traces of life, making it seem as though no human had ever set foot there. Yet if there was a European bold enough to conquer what was deemed the empty land of mankind, it could only have been Bertram Thomas. Born in Somerset, England, in 1892, Thomas was no stranger to the Middle East. During his service on the battlefields of Mesopotamia in the First World War, he quickly forged profound relationships with the local people, not only fighting alongside them, but also rising to become a senior political advisor to the Sultan of Oman. He understood this land, he understood its people, and more importantly, he understood the dangers that lay hidden beyond the treacherous dunes. On October 6, 1930, Bertram Thomas officially set out from the coastal city of Salalah in Oman, accompanied by 25 native Bedouins. They headed northward, traversing the Kara Mountains, soaring more than 3,000 feet above sea level, passing through forests of frankincense trees, and gradually entering a land so remote that it remained nameless on any map. For the next 59 days, the world lost all contact with him. The British government had no knowledge of his whereabouts or his activities. Had they known, they likely would have forbidden the expedition from the very beginning. But Thomas understood that the greatest journeys often do not begin by waiting for permission. He ventured into the desert in silence, without farewells, without a contingency plan should disaster strike. Because if catastrophe befell him amid that endless sea of sand, there would be no one coming to save him. Then, on February 5, 1931, as if stepping out of legend itself, Bertram Thomas appeared in Doha, Qatar, healthy, unharmed, and carrying something few could have ever imagined. During his expedition, he had collected over 400 natural specimens, among them 21 species entirely unknown to Western science. But these specimens were merely the tip of the iceberg. For what truly captured the imagination was the mystery he brought back, a legend passed down through generations of Bedouins, of a once splendid ancient city that had existed somewhere deep within the desert, now buried and forgotten under the sands of time. Amid the grueling journey across the Rub al-Khali, where every trace of life seemed to have been buried beneath the winds and sands thousands of years ago, Bertram Thomas was given more than just guidance about the terrain or survival tips from the Bedouin caravan accompanying him. He was entrusted with a story, one about a colossal, legendary city. When night fell upon the lightless expanse, under the flickering glow of the campfire and the hiss of teapots boiling over glowing embers, the Bedouin elders began to recount a legend that had been passed down through countless generations. They spoke of a great city, a place that had existed in ancient times, which their forefathers called by a single name, Iram. One of the older Bedouins, speaking in a steady voice and gazing into the distant dark, told Thomas, "It was a magnificent city, as our ancestors have said, a thriving city with priceless treasures, flourishing gardens, and a fortress built of red silver. But now, it all lies beneath the heavy sands. The city is somewhere, just a few days' journey to the north." For a man like Thomas, the one who had walked through war, served as a royal advisor, and lived among vastly different cultures. It was not easy to be swayed by a story without tangible proof. But when he listened to the tale of Iram, he did not dismiss it. He remained silent, carefully recording every detail. Although he carried an intense curiosity about the story, Thomas knew he could not pause his journey to search for Iram. The path across the desert was still long, the supplies were dwindling, and every passing moment was a battle against time, heat, and exhaustion. Yet he made a promise to himself that if he survived and returned, he would come back again, this time not merely to cross the desert, but to seek out the forgotten city buried beneath the sands. He never had the chance to return, but he did not let the story disappear. In the book Arabia Felix that he published after his journey, Thomas devoted an entire chapter to faithfully and meticulously recounting this legend. For Western readers at the time, the story of Iram was like a door opening onto an era when the world was still brimming with mysteries yet to be uncovered. The folk legends of Iram were not merely whispered among the nomadic tribes of the desert, they also appeared within the Quran itself. In one of the sternest warnings from God, the Prophet Muhammad spoke of a people who once ruled over a land now reduced to nothing but dust. They were known as the Ad tribe, and they lived in the city of Iram, a place described in such vivid imagery that, were it not for the solemnity of the holy text, one might easily mistake it for exaggeration. According to the Quran, the Ad were not simply a scattered group wandering the desert. They built a powerful civilization, marked by colossal structures and pillars, loftier than any ever seen, symbols of their strength and prosperity. They did not live in quiet obscurity. They ruled over their land as though they had been granted supreme authority. And, like so many civilizations whose pride grew into arrogance, the Ad tribe vanished because of that very arrogance. They denied the existence of God, mocked the admonitions of the Prophet Hud, who had been sent to guide them back to the righteous path. They believed their power and their wealth were untouchable. And then, the long silence of God came to an end. It began with a drought. The Prophet Hud pleaded with them to pray and to repent, but his words were dismissed like whispers in the wind. Then, one day, they saw a dark cloud drifting toward the city of Iram. The entire tribe rejoiced. They believed rain was coming. They celebrated, convinced that salvation was near. But what that cloud carried was not water. A sandstorm unlike anything they had ever seen descended upon Iram, raging for 7 nights and 8 days. The winds struck like hammers. The sand cut through the air like knives, and the people fell. The question that has haunted scholars for centuries afterward is this: was the story merely a religious metaphor, a cautionary tale, or was it real? For if the words recorded in the Quran are indeed true, if Iram once existed as an actual city, then it would mean that somewhere beneath our feet lie the remnants of a kingdom so defiant that it dared to challenge the gods themselves. And even more astonishingly, the Quran is not the only source that speaks of this lost city. If the Quran recounts the story of Iram as a solemn warning imbued with divine gravity, then within the magical realm of Middle Eastern literature, Iram appears like a golden dream that readers find themselves unable to awaken from. There, it is not merely a city that once existed, it becomes a symbol of everything mankind longs for but can never truly possess. In the collection 1001 Nights, there is a little-known story, yet one that carries an uncanny sense of haunting. It is the tale of Abdullah bin Ali Kalaba, a solitary man who ventured into the desert with the simple goal of finding a lost camel, only to discover something that would leave scholars and lovers of legend alike in awe. While tracing the footsteps of the stray animal, Abdullah suddenly beheld a city emerging silently from the sea of sand. It was no mirage. It was no trick played by the burning sun or exhaustion. It was a real city, vast, magnificent, showing no signs of life yet bearing no signs of ruin. He recounted, "I dismounted, tethered my horse, gathered my courage, and entered the city. When I reached the castle, I saw a magnificent gate, unlike anything the world had ever seen, adorned with every kind of precious gem and stones of red, gold, and emerald green. Stepping inside, Abdullah felt as if he had wandered into a place that did not belong to this world. Palaces stretched into the distance, floors were paved with pearls, walls were inlaid with amber and musk. Beneath the balconies, silent rivers flowed, flanked by trees heavy with fruit, and the ground itself was laid with alternating bricks of gold and silver. Upon returning, Abdullah immediately reported his discovery to the local authorities. He brought with him some treasures he had gathered as proof that his story was not a fabrication. The officials were astounded by his account but remained skeptical, so they summoned an elderly scholar, one who was said to be versed in every ancient legend. Upon hearing the description, the old scholar did not hesitate. He replied, "My lord, that is none other than Iram, the city of resplendent pillars, a marvel beyond comparison. It was built by King Shaddad, the son of the mighty King Ad." And then, as those present held their breath in silence, he began to tell the story of Shaddad, a king so powerful he ruled over the entire earth, commanding hundreds of thousands of subjects, each overseeing countless legions of soldiers. But Shaddad craved more than power. He sought immortality. Upon reading ancient scriptures describing the heavens and the glories of the afterlife, Shaddad conceived an audacious ambition to create his own paradise on earth. He commanded the construction of Iram, a magnificent city unlike any the world had ever seen, gathering the finest craftsmen from the four corners of the earth to forge an alchemical heaven. And when it was completed, Shaddad and his vast army set out for the city he had built. Yet just one day's journey from their destination, a thunderous roar from the heavens descended, sweeping away the entire army, obliterating Shaddad and leaving no soul alive. And Allah erased the path leading to the city, leaving it to remain unchanging in the desert, yet invisible to the eyes of mankind. If that story were merely a legend, then how could it so eerily align with the descriptions found in the Quran about Ad and Iram? And if both, a sacred scripture and a collection of ancient fairy tales, point to the same place, the same fate, then can it truly be called coincidence? For centuries, the story of Iram was mentioned only through the sacred verses of the Quran and the mythical tales of 1001 Nights. At least that was the case until the 1970s. Not in the Arabian desert, but far to the north in Syria, hundreds of miles from where Iram was said to be, a team of archaeologists led by Professor Paolo Mattiai of the University of Rome began an excavation that would span many years. They were working at a mound known as Tel Mardikh, a site that for years had revealed nothing more than fragments of broken pottery and rubble. But then, in 1968, a weathered stone statue was unearthed. On its base was an inscription in the ancient script, Ibit Lim, King of Ebla. The name Ebla had appeared sporadically in Egyptian, Sumerian, and Akkadian texts, but no one had ever located the city itself. Now, beneath that mound, lay the ruins of one of the most prosperous cities of the ancient Middle East, dating back 4,000 years. The discovery of Ebla opened the door to one of the greatest archaeological treasures of the 20th century. Within a palace that had been reduced to ashes millennia ago, the team unearthed tens of thousands of clay tablets that remained remarkably intact. Over the decades that followed, linguists painstakingly worked to decipher the ancient characters etched into those tiny slabs, and what they uncovered exceeded all expectations. The tablets were not merely records of administration. They formed an entire historical library, documenting trade relations, wars, treaties, and diplomatic notes between Ebla and dozens of city-states of that era, from Byblos, Gaza, and Damascus to the various Canaanite groups. And then, among the countless names listed across those clay tablets, one name emerged: Iram, the city of towers. In multiple tablets, Iram was referenced as a real location, an ancient trading hub renowned for its wealth, mysterious religious practices, and rites of black magic. The mention sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. This was not a fable, nor was it a sacred verse. It was an administrative record, a piece of actual documentation. And even more significant was the wording used to describe Iram in the Ebla tablets: the legendary city. In an uncanny twist, the same city that Muslims believed had been erased from the earth by the hand of God. The same city whispered about by Bedouins beside campfires. The same city that haunted T.E. Lawrence in letters that were never sent, now appeared within the dry, factual archives of an ancient city hundreds of miles away, dating back 4,000 years. And if Iram truly once existed, then the question is no longer whether it was real. The questions now are, where is it, and what truly caused it to disappear? In the early 1980s, Nicholas Clapp, a documentary filmmaker, writer, and amateur archaeologist, placed a call to one of the most prestigious research centers in the world, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, in Pasadena, California. In a calm, deliberate voice, he asked a simple yet weighty question. If there were an ancient city buried beneath the sands, could you see it from space? Clapp was no stranger to grand dreams. Since childhood, he had been haunted by Arabia Felix, Bertram Thomas's book, and the unfinished story of Iram, the city that had never been found. He understood the limitations Thomas had faced. He knew that maps held no answers, but satellites might, and NASA could peer through meters of sand to detect geological formations and man-made structures buried below. In 1984, this radar system was flown over the Rub al-Khali, the vast, forbidding desert that Thomas had crossed nearly 50 years earlier. The data collected was processed using the most advanced imaging techniques of the time, and what they discovered stunned everyone. On the screen appeared a network of ancient trails stretching across the desert. These were not modern roads. They were not random depressions. They were ancient trade routes forged by hundreds of thousands of footsteps and camel hooves over the course of centuries. And then, Clapp noticed that almost all these routes converged on a single point, a trade nexus where camels, people, and goods once gathered, as though it had been the beating heart of a desert economy. That point of convergence was none other than the oasis of Shisar. Clapp immediately realized he could not undertake this alone. He invited Juris Zarins, a renowned American archaeologist famous for decoding the mysteries of ancient Middle Eastern civilizations. He also reached out to Sir Ranulph Fiennes, a British explorer often hailed as the last living adventurer of the heroic age. Together, they formed a unique team, a blend of science, intuition, and extraordinary experience. It did not take long after the excavations began for all doubts to vanish. Those who had once thought the fortress at Shisar was merely a few hundred years old were correct. But what no one had anticipated was this. It had been built atop the ruins of something far more ancient. They began to unearth strange stones, hand-laid walls, and shattered foundations long buried by time and sand. Beneath the fortress lay the remnants of a city nearly 5,000 years old. A place that once boasted sturdy, durable structures, complete with storage systems, cargo processing areas, and, most importantly, a central fortress surrounded by 8 massive walls, each more than 10 feet high and stretching 60 feet in length, with 4 round towers at the corners, resembling the legendary pillars described in both the Quran and 1001 Nights. At the time Nicholas Clapp's team arrived at Shisar, the archaeological world remained skeptical. Perhaps they had uncovered an ancient ruin. Perhaps it had once been an important trading center. But could anyone truly dare to claim that this was Iram, the city of legend? Yet as the layers of earth and stone were excavated, the story refused to end there. The archaeologists did not simply find an isolated dwelling. They uncovered a large settlement, complete with organized architecture. At its center stood a massive fortress, surrounded by towering walls, with a round tower at each corner measuring 10 feet in diameter and nearly 30 feet in height, exactly like the descriptions in the Quran of pillars the like of which had never been seen. Inside the fortress were rooms, storage chambers, and traces of an operational system, suggesting that this place had once served simultaneously as a royal palace, a hub for goods in transit, and the administrative heart of a functioning city. As researchers measured and compared their findings, they realized something remarkable. The layout of this city was unlike any other settlement of its era in the region. It had been built not merely to house people, but to project power. And then, as they dug deeper, they discovered that the entire city had been constructed atop a network of natural limestone caverns. Over thousands of years, the immense weight of the structures above, combined with erosion from underground water, had gradually weakened the foundation. Eventually, at a moment lost to history, the ground collapsed, swallowing much of the city into the earth. What remained was only the exposed portion of a mystery that ran even deeper. For Nicholas Clapp, there was no longer any doubt. He believed the city had been found, a powerful ancient center located precisely at the convergence of major trade routes, featuring round tower architecture matching historical accounts, burdened with a history of being buried beneath the sands, and now slowly emerging once more. This, he believed, was Iram, the city punished by the winds of heaven, consumed by the passage of time, and now being restored to its rightful place in the chronicles of history. Ranulph Fiennes, Clapp's companion, agreed wholeheartedly. He wrote a book shortly after the expedition, titled Atlantis of the Sands. No longer a symbolic name, but a declaration. The legend was real, and it had been found. What do you think about the story we just explored? Would you feel the urge to set out immediately in search of the Golden City? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.